Hello, it's Andy Nolch here. It's been a long time since I've done a video, and this one is going to be me commenting on an interview I did like 7 years ago probably, because I'm no longer a Scientologist now, and so I want to comment on a video and an interview that I did, and say my opinion of it now that I'm outside of the Scientology bubble. Because I saw Jonathan Burke post this interview recently, and I listened to it, and it was just interesting listening to it now with all I know and all my opinions now, because I think totally differently. And I think that people would like to hear what I have to think about how I used to be when I was, you could say, brainwashed by Scientology. So I'm going to play it now. It's Jonathan Burke, Indie Scientology podcast number 19, part 1. And I'm just going to pause it when I have something to say, but you can follow along and listen to it. And if you are a Scientologist, and also to Jonathan Burke, I kind of don't recommend you to even listen to this because, firstly, I'm not having a go at you or anything, but secondly, I kind of don't want Scientologists to even know the truth about Scientology, because I think if they fully knew, they would leave Scientology and then no one would be doing it. But it's such an interesting rabbit hole to have gone down, and it was such an interesting religion to have had, that I would like other people to have that experience. And I think it's kind of bullshit. But you get wins from it, and it opens up your mind, and it definitely increases your ability to read and stuff. But I don't want Scientology to disappear. And so, yeah, so if you are a Scientologist and you're listening to this, whether you're inside or outside the church, I kind of would prefer you not to listen to this. But if you want the truth, see, I'm always for the truth. I always go, and the truth can send you down nasty areas, and it can be a rough journey, but I'm always for the truth, and that's the path I've decided to take in life. So I have to go where the truth leads me, and it sends you down on adventures. But some people aren't quite like that. They're happy with sticking with one religion and not finding out the truth, and they don't like to hear things that are nasty because it upsets them, and I don't blame them for that. If they're cool with the way you are, then just keep on doing what you're doing. But anyway, let's get into this. Let's hear some talk about the McDonald's of religions, the Cadillac of cults, Scientology. All right, today's guest interview is with Jonathan Burke, an OT8 auditor. He runs the Advanced Organisation of the Great Plains. It is like a travelling mission and delivers tech up to OT5. John's based in Kansas City, has been a SIO for many years, and he also hosts a podcast called Scientology Outside the Church, which has some interesting interviews. Are you there, John?
Hello, I am. How are you?
Great, I'm good. How you doing?
Awesome.
Yeah? You what'd you do today? You doing some auditing?
A little bit of auditing, a little bit of solo auditing.
All right. Sweet. Okay, first thing I was thinking just then, so he was doing some solo auditing, and he's a high-level Scientologist, so he would have been doing OT level, something like that. First thing I think of with that is that, now that I know what I know, is that what they're doing on these high levels is that they're doing the same thing day after day after day after day, and it's taking them ages to reach the EP. You'll hear stories about people, I think it's OT level, OT7, where they stay on it just for ages. And I was puzzled because I was like, I don't get why they're not getting the EP. And the thing is that Hubbard writes things in a shit way, and it's very vague. So it's like the EP is something that's written down, and you're like, well, I don't know if I've got it or not. And it's very wishy-washy, basically. But also what they're doing on these OT levels is the tech essentially doesn't work. So let's say they've got a sore knee, or they've got an upset with their cousin or something like that, because their cousin's a nutter or something. The the tech never really cures that. So they go in session again and they deal with that same thing again, or they go in session the next day and they do it again. It's kind of like every time you're tired at 4 p.m. on a weekday, you go in session to handle that. And so, of course, you're going to be tired at 4 p.m. on a weekday every day. And it could be because you're getting old, but also it could be because you've got bacteria imbalances in your stomach and your stomach system isn't working well. And if you took a certain type of probiotic, you could have fantastic results and find you have energy all the time. But because you're essentially not handling the correct why, the problem comes up again, again, and again. And this is the whole of Scientology. So Scientology at the start, Hubbard came up with the Dianetics therapy, and then he came up with the purification, and then the objectives auditing, and then the grades, and then the OT levels, and then the L's. And the person who's doing it is continually trying to solve their problem. And they get given the why is you need to do the purif, you need to do the grades, you need to do the OT levels. And none of those things really permanently actually cure their problem. So they keep on doing it again and again and again. And the whole of Scientology is an incorrect why. Now, I'm not saying you can't get benefit from the therapy, right? Because you get asked interesting questions and it can open up your mind. But if you've got a genetic disorder, that, for example, there's a disorder called MTHFR where you don't absorb folic acid, which is vitamin B9, you're always going to have energy problems and emotional problems because your body's not functioning correctly, right? And what you need to do is take an activated form of vitamin B9 and take an activated form of B12 as well, and some of the other B vitamins as well. And that can really help you. And let's go even further. You need to start eating eggs and meat. But you could have a PC that's in front of you, and if they're vegetarian, then they're gone. I mean, they're going to be fucked up. I mean, some people can handle vegetarianism, but a lot can't. And they get emotional problems, and they turn to meditation because a lot of them are hippies and stuff like that. So, of course, they continually go to meditation or Buddhism, or in this case, it could be Scientology or whatever. And they're not handling the right why. They don't know what it's like a car that's not getting fixed right. And so, like with me, for example, I experimented with cutting out red meat, eggs, and dairy. They have a lot of B vitamins in them. And so I didn't go vegetarian because I was still having fish and chicken, but I was like half vegetarian. And it doesn't happen straight away because as time goes on, you very slowly deplete your B vitamin levels. But after a few years, that was when it was like, whoa, I'm fucked up. And this was in about late 2023. And I knew something was wrong with me. I couldn't even work. Like, I was just tired all the time. And, of course I would blame the government and like boring work and stuff like that. But I knew physically something was wrong with me. I'm like, I'm back to what I was before I even began trying to improve my health, like back before I even got into Scientology. I was like, why am I feeling so bad? And then I popped a B complex, an activated B complex pill. And a few days later, I noticed a difference. And I was like, oh, I'm not feeling like I want to kill people and shit. Like, I'm not feeling really bad, And I had more energy. And then I went on, and I still hadn't worked it out yet. And then I went and the reason I stopped red meat was because I noticed I was reacting to it. And sometimes you do react to things when your whole system's fucked. You react to everything. But I thought that meant red meat's evil because I bought into the vegan propaganda. And so I completely cut out red meat. Anyway, I was near a shop that had good kebabs. And so I had a good dose of red meat and lamb. And then I worked a job, and it was right near the kebab shop. And I did the whole job and I had energy, and I was like, oh, wow, what the hell? Firstly, I was I would have reactions to the red meat, like a bloated stomach or feel yawning or something like that. And then I worked the whole job and I was like, wow, that red meat was good. And then I went down the whole rabbit hole finding out about all the good benefits of red meat and finding out the truth about vegetarianism. Anyway, and finding out that red meat has these nutrients in it like the B9 and B12 in the forms that you can absorb, not the shitty synthetic forms which they put into breakfast cereals. Those ones actually harm you. Anyway, you can have a Scientologist that's not eating his eggs, because eggs have it, not eating his kebabs. He's eating lots of pasta. He's gotten brainwashed by vegetarianism and he's eating a lot of vegetables, right? And he's feeling shit continually and he's having lack of energy. What do you think is going to happen when he goes and does Scientology? He does it again and again. He's never having his problem handled. And this is what happens to a lot of people while they give up on Scientology after a few years, or it could even be 30 years, but they eventually give up because they're not handling the actual why. It's very complex finding out the correct why, because a lot of people are selling you different things and it takes years to find the correct thing. And Hubbard was a part of selling incorrect things, and that's why he kept on developing more tech and kept on modifying the tech, because you might go, why does he have so many processes and so many blah blah? Because he was just churning out shit and saying, oh, try this process, and blah, oh, try this, and oh, now I've got it worked out, this is what you're doing, oh, now we've got new tech. And then COB has continued the exact same trend that Hubbard had, where COB had Golden Age of Tech 1 and Golden Age of Tech 2, and then he had minor modifications, arbitraries removed between those sort of things, and because he was doing the exact same sales technique that Hubbard was doing. You need to continually give people a new thing that will solve their problem. Anyway, so what we'll talk about here is we're talking about how Jonathan was on his higher levels and he was doing his solo auditing. Solo auditing is just another thing where they go in each day again and they handle the same thing and the same thing, and it's hard to get the EP because it's vague. And how the handling works is, I'm not going to give the actual technique that they use, but I can give you an example, because I went to this hippie, actually it was one of these, speaking of vegetarianism, it was one of these things where the only food you could get was vegetarianism. And because I went through like a little hit, like I was saying, I was going through a little vegetarian period, but I'm still going to go now that I'm not a vegetarian. But this was when I was at my height of being half vegetarian. Basically, I went to this hippie festival, one of those ones where they walk around naked and stuff like that. It's called Confest. If you're ever in Australia, go to it, because it is just like, what the talk about squirrely and talk about funny. I mean, it was just like, what the fuck? I remember I'm going off topic, but I remember I was quite surprised at the energy level of people, and I was saying, oh, see what it's like when you don't eat meat, look how much energy you have. What actually happens is, it's so complex. When your body doesn't get the nutrients it needs and doesn't get meat which it needs, you go into starvation mode, and guess what your body does? It starts releasing cortisol, similar to what coffee does. So you are kind of high on a drug because you're high on this adrenaline thing and stuff. And so they're all like adrenaline and like cortisone or cortisol or something like that. So they were literally high, but it was just like natural drugs. And there were some other drugs besides that, but it wasn't as much drugs as I thought it would be. They were actually quite anti-drug, and they're actually very woke these days as well. So they're very Me Too, and they're very... It's just crazy because these festivals 30 years ago were the most open sexually things ever. Like, they were like wild sexually and stuff like that. And they were very wild with drugs. And now they're like becoming very closed sexually, except very open to gayness though. That's so popular. The whole rainbow thing's so popular. But the drugs I was amazed at how little alcohol and drugs there was. Like, they really, I mean, it's a really good thing, to be honest. But anyway, I thought it was going to be a drug festival more than anything, but it wasn't. Anyway, so that's why they were buzzing and on a high, because they were buzzing from the cortisol, I think it's cortisol, from the lack of getting their nutrients in their food. Anyway, so at this festival, there was a guy that was doing some squirrely technique to solve people's emotional problems or like a physical problem that they had. And he was totally brainwashed by his own technique that he was using. And it could be Hubbard could have invented this, and it could have been like an assist or something like that. It just totally sounded like something like that. It was just some thingo. But he was, smoking his own dope and high on his own supply, like totally into his own thingo. And it was interesting trying his technique, because as a group we did it. And basically it was like, the technique was like, it's similar to the OT levels, where it was something like, it was like, I don't know, find a body part or find a problem in your body, and then think of an emotion connected to it, and then go back to an earlier moment where you remember that, and then an earlier one or something like that, and then the problem is supposed to go away. And he was talking about doing it, and he goes, I do it for my eyes, because I get the problem with my eyes, my eyesight. And it's like, yeah, it's because you're like 60 years old and you need glasses. But anyway, he was rejecting getting glasses. And he was like, yeah, I do it for my glasses and it solves my problem. Yeah, and I don't need to have glasses. And that sounds so great. But then he kept on talking, and later on he then says, well, I have to do it every day because my eyesight's every day. And then I was just thinking, well, hold on a second. Did it cure your problem with your eyesight or didn't it? This is sounding very Scientology-like. And then he later on, he mentioned even more. And basically he was having to do it continually, multiple times a day to cure his eye problem. And it's like, dude, it's not working, okay? You're doing it multiple times a day. You've got a problem with your eyes. You're not finding the real problem to your eyes, right? You're not finding the real why. And that's why you're having to use your stupid technique over and over and again. And it's proving that your technique's not working. You got to find the correct why, and it might be that he needs eye surgery. It might be that he needs to take certain antioxidant supplements, which do something in the body that improves the blood flow to your eyes. And then your lenses in your eyes can open and close better. And then things aren't blurry all the time, right? There's other reasons for things. Anyway, but this guy's technique that he would do regularly for other problems he would have, it reminded me very much of the OT levels. So the person who's on the OT levels, they have some problem that they're trying to handle, and it doesn't really handle it. Or if it does handle it, it only gives them a temporary high for 1 hour, and then it just comes back again. And then you have to do it again and then again. And then next minute, they're on OT7 for 4 years. And it's like, how are you on OT7 for 4 years? And it's like, because you're just going into session, sitting down with the cans, solo auditing, doing the same thing again and again and again and again. And it's not curing you. It's just like, you might as well sit down and do a really good meditation or something like that. You got to find the best technique that works. And because Scientologists are so brainwashed by Scientology, they're not open to doing other things. And there's heaps of other things. There's hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which I'm going to go to Bali soon to do, where you go into a chamber and it increases the pressure in the chamber and it pumps oxygen in there. And the oxygen goes deep and saturates into your body, and it literally cures things and stuff. I had like a lower back problem last year, and after I did this oxygen chamber therapy for like 90 minutes, the next day when I went to do yoga, my back was like not sore, and I was amazed. I was like, wow. And then people are using this to cure problems and stuff like that. Like it really works. Anyway, there's all these different things, but the problem is the Scientologists, because Hubbard said don't do squirrely stuff or don't look into other areas, they're trapped within this little matrix in this Scientology world, in this Scientology bubble, and they think they've got to try this thing and that thing and that thing in Scientology, and none of them really handle it. And the big outpoint in Scientology, the big why of Scientology is that it's mental therapy. That's the big why. It's Hubbard's version of psychology. He took psychology with its at the time it had the subconscious mind and all that sort of stuff. He took that idea and just slapped his own names to it, like reactive mind and reverie instead of like a hypnotic state, because reverie is a hypnotic state. It's like a semi-whatever state. And it doesn't mean you have to be zonked out of it. You can be aware when you're in a hypnotic state. I've tried hypnotic regression therapy. It's the same thing. But Hubbard gave his own labels to it to copyright it and create its own little bubble and make our own product out of it. He made like a McDonald's out of hypnotic regression therapy. You know what I mean? anyway, so like that thing that I experienced on that hippie festival, it was just so similar to what they're doing on the OT levels. And that's why, I mean, but back when I didn't know all this sort of stuff, I was so mystified. Like, what are you doing on these OT levels? Oh. And then when you find out what they're really doing, you're like, oh, so you're just sitting in a chair, you're doing blah, 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 again and again, day after day, day after day, day after day, and you're just not getting anywhere. And then sometimes, I'm not denying that a miracle does occur, but you have to understand the placebo effect. And I'm going to give a full explanation of that now because most people don't get it. Because the placebo effect is mind-blowing. It's incredible as an effect. It relates not just to Scientology, it relates to marketing, it relates to governments and scams and COVID and just like everything, the placebo effect. There's two types of placebo effect. There's one where the person thinks they get better, but they're not better, they're just deluded and they're a bit dumb. And there are a lot of Scientologists who are like that. They actually think that they've achieved this OT state or these higher states, yet they still have problems with their elbow. They still have family dramas. And it's like, dude, you're not clear. I mean, you're just not clear. But they think they are. But then there's a second placebo one, which is the most interesting one. And that is where the person actually does magically cure themselves. And it does sometimes happen, but it's actually quite rare. And it's probably something to do with using the power of your thoughts. And it does actually work. And so a lot of these people, they're going in and they're doing Scientology, and they've sort of been told that Scientology is scientific and it's exact, and you do this and you achieve that. And the thing is that the real truth is you should probably say, look, go and do that, and you have a chance that you might fluke it and have a miracle occur with the placebo effect. But it's quite unlikely. It's like 95% unlikely. But you might have a miracle, so good on you. Like, go and try it. But like, you're kind of sold because you're paying so much to do Scientology and putting so much effort. You really expect more, and you're very likely to have nothing. Like, it's not going to magically cure your elbow. But people still do it. And with the placebo effect, they've done experiments. They've taken people and they've like opened up their stomach. People who, let's say, they've had a liver problem, and some people they've just put a scut, like they've cut the stomach, and they haven't done anything, and they've just stitched it back up, and they told the person that they had liver therapy, right? And then they took people who had a bad liver, and they actually did liver work on it, and they actually repaired the liver. And some of the people who didn't actually receive liver therapy, they actually got better, literally got better. Like, it wasn't just they were thinking it, like the first version of placebo effect. They actually got the second version where it magically got better with their thoughts. So that's a legitimate thing. And, you know, skeptics, people like John Attack and Chris Shelton, they're not going to confront these sort of ideas because it blows their minds too much. But it really can happen. And so, but it's just, like I like to use a hammer because you grab a hammer and it works every time. Like my car works every time. It's reliable, but you got to find a solution that's exact and precise and scientific and works every time. But like, it's hard relying on miracles, but I don't blame someone for trying, right? But the placebo effect is incredible, and Scientology has many instances of the placebo effect. And I would say it's Hubbard, as a brilliant salesman, which is the biggest skill he had, and talking shit, which is what salesmen are brilliant at. That's the biggest thing that Scientology has, is he's selling people the placebo effect, basically. And when people, and there's also I think it's called the sunken cost fallacy, where people put so much money and effort and time into something, and they just, in their mind, they're just like, I must be getting something from this. I must be getting something from this. And they keep on being really positive and thinking they're getting something from it. And then eventually they end up just giving up because they're like, all right, it didn't really work. And they got some stuff from it, but then when they look back on it and they think about it, and they're like, oh yeah, I was really hyping that up and expecting to get more from it. So that's what's going on with Scientology, and it's with so many other things. There's, for example, for guys who can't get a girl, for example. There's all these videos online and all these courses that teach you how to get a girl, basically. And you can sign up for them and do them and stuff like that. And the influencers who are selling this content, they're using similar tactics to Hubbard. It's all sales and marketing and stuff like that, and selling placebo effects and sunken cost fallacies and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, I'll continue this video.
These are a little slow.
Yep. So you've got this traveling mission, right? So how does that work? Like you visit someone who you want to audit?
Well, somebody contacts me and says, I want X services, whether it's training or processing. And then we work out the details.
Well, I'm just thinking, Scientology doesn't have that many people interested in it, but you can still make good money in it. And that represents how brainwashed the people are who do it. Because they get, when you do Scientology in the church and then it sort of continues outside the church, you're so misled into what it can actually do and achieve that you're willing to fork out $300 an hour or something like that. But if you really knew all the information about it, you wouldn't be paying $300 an hour, basically. And that's another thing with advertising and marketing. It's all about convincing the person that something's worth a lot and then they pay a lot. It kind of reminds me of cryptocurrencies where they pump and dump them. And so the system gets behind a certain cryptocurrency or something like that, and they get people to think and hype and, this is going to be the next thing. It's going to be blah, 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 blah. It's going to boom. It's going to be worth $100,000 next year, blah, 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 blah. And they all increase the value of it artificially, and then it shoots up in price. But it's not really worth that. It's just all these people have been tricked. And then the bubble goes up higher, and then at some point people question if it's worth a lot, and then it starts going down. People are like, shit's going to go down more. Then it just shoots back down and plummets, and actually plummets down to lower than what it kind of is worth. And then it bounces back up, and then it kind of gets to a low level that it's worth, because it was always just sort of worth that lowish level, below average level. That's what it's worth naturally. And then it sits like that, and then maybe somebody comes on again and there's hype again and advertising, and then it pumps it back up and creates another bubble, and it's just ridiculous. But this is all how pump and dump works, and how marketing and sales and all that sort of stuff work. Something's only as valuable as people think it is valuable, right? It's not like that Scientology course is actually valuable. It's like, it depends on how convinced people are that it's valuable. It's the same with football jerseys. If the whole world's full of Andy, probably no football jersey that's signed by the team would ever be worth anything, because I would never, I might fork out $30 or something like that. An NFL football jersey, the winning team, Kansas City, that won the whatever. Like, I wouldn't fork out money for that to have it on the wall. I mean, I might actually buy it thinking that other people will pay money for it, and then it's worth something, and then I can sell it on. But I wouldn't actually want that. But when all these people think it's amazing, and this football jersey, wow, oh my God, it's signed by the team, wow, they won the Super Bowl, wow, then that puts the price up. So it's all economics. This is how things work. It's not worth. If it's a local football team, it's not worth anything. But if it's the Kansas City, it's worth a lot, because a lot of people want it on their wall. It's just advertising.
As far as what they want to do, if the timing's right, we go to their area, whether it's 4 states away or 1 state away.
So I'm just saying, the reason why Hubbard was able to get away with charging so much for Scientology, and chairman of the board was able to put up prices to just such a ridiculous price during the 80s and stuff, which Hubbard was involved with as well, by the way, because Hubbard was into money, and he knew how to run the game and everything, and he absolutely knew, capitalize now, put the prices up as much as possible. We are busy, people are loving this, charge tons for it. Hubbard was into the money from the start. He was a sleazy person. When you find out the truth about Hubbard, like, that's probably where, if you want to, you're probably not going to believe what I'm saying, but the trick to understand the whole of Scientology is get to the bottom of Hubbard and his private life and what sort of person he was, and you will be shocked. He was not at all what he advertised himself as. He was a fake person, basically. A classic salesman. Anyway, so the fact that people were paying so much money for Scientology and donating so much is just an index of how brainwashed they are.
Set up shop
and how well they've been sold and how hard sold they've been sold and how well they've had information hidden from them.
Coach and deliver the services either in our RV/coach or go over to their house and audit and or train. Simple as that.
Cool. So because it's sort of interesting. Like, do you go? Is there a team with you, or is it just you and your husband and wife?
It's just me.
That's an embarrassing mistake.
Yeah, but you've got a CS and everything.
Yeah, we have a CS. Much like many of us in the field do, it's all via the internet. Though I scan whatever sessions I have, I send them to her as a PDF file, and then get the session reply gets sent back as an email or a PDF. And gets put in the folder and watch, rinse, repeat.
All right, cool. And what about, besides the CS, do you have anyone else that's part of your team?
We have a couple other case supervisors, 2 other auditors that work part-time, depending on where people are needed, mostly in Kansas City. They're based. I do most of the traveling because, well, I have the vehicle to travel in. So, other than that, it's just a matter of time, place, form, and event when somebody needs me. A lot of people can't travel because of their jobs, and they want to have somebody come to them and deliver to them. I tend to audit more of the upper bridge with people than I do the lower bridge, just for the fact that that's what people ask for.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea what you've got going, because it's in places like Europe and America, you can just travel from like state or country to country or whatever, and it can keep you really busy. It's almost similar to like what some stand-up comedians do. And I mean, you can just live in an RV or these little tiny home things that they've got, which are pretty cool. Like you can buy a nice big tiny home. I got a friend who builds them. And they're pretty sweet, these tiny home things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. Those are usually smaller than what we have. Ours is a 43-foot triple slide, and then we have a trailer behind it. So,
I'm going to say something as well about when you meet Scientologists and stuff like that. You, especially as high-level Scientologists, you don't know much about their personal life when you first get into Scientology, and if you knew more about their personal life, then you would question the efficacy of the high-level tech and Scientology in general. And so that's why you don't find, like when you first get into Scientology, you're just learning and you're just meeting people and you're like, hey, blah, 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 he seems all right, she seems all right, blah, blah, blah. And then as the years go on, you're like, oh, I found out this about this person, and oh, I found out that about that person. And then you're like, oh, okay, all right, maybe they're not that clear. You know what I mean? So it starts to get to the bottom of Scientology and wake yourself out of it. You got to be in it for a few years and stuff like that at least, and you got to ask questions, and then you start finding out more things, and you're like, oh, okay, so all right, and like that person's done grade 0, is it? And they're supposed to be fantastic with communication, but they're not. And oh, okay. And I remember one time when I was doing Scientology, and I get it now, but I thought it was strange. And it was probably when I was at the height of my Scientology brainwashing, when I was involved with the church. And I was on staff helping out, and this guy got up, and he was like, he'd been around Scientology for 30 years, like on and off. And he'd just finished one of the higher levels, maybe OT7 or something like that. And they said, oh, go do a speech. And he was like, oh, I don't really want to do it. Okay. And I know why I didn't really want to do it now. But he went up and he said his speech, and he goes, okay, so Sarah called me up and, you know, wanted me to do the OT5, and I was a bit reluctant, and, you know, and so, but anyway, I ended up doing it, and he was obviously a bit in apathy because he was allowing Scientology to push him around. And then I completed it, and then they, you know, sold me on the next one, and then I did the next one, and I was like, okay, that was done, and yeah, that was it. And basically he was saying, he didn't say it directly, but he was basically saying, yeah, these levels were just shit. And you can tell if you had a private conversation with him, he would say, yeah, I've been around Scientology for 30 years and it just hasn't really done anything and it's just shit and it hasn't solved problems. But he wasn't willing to say that with the pressure from the group and all the staff that were like, yeah, you completed OT6, go say it. And like, you could, all the pressure was behind the guy, and you could tell he was like trying to keep his ethics in because he wanted to tell the truth, but then he didn't want to tell the truth because it was like, it would wreck the whole group and the hype of the whole group. And it was actually really funny because it was like, it was viewed upon as being very quirky. Like, I didn't recreate it well, you had to have been there, but it was just quirky because like, oh, that was a weird success story. And basically the reason why the Regis had to go in and get him to do the next level and the next level was because he was saying that it was shit. And then you can tell that after he gave that speech, you can tell he was not going to do any more Scientology. You could tell he was just, that was it. You could tell he'd already gone all the way up and seen it was just shit. And like, anyway, but when I was in Scientology, you see that and you just, I guess you're busy with other things and you sort of ignore it and you just explain it away with mental gymnastics, and you're just like, well, that guy was quirky. Or I thought, well, that guy's naturally just a bored sort of guy. And that's why he was basically implying that the OT levels were boring, you know? And now I know much more about it, you know, and it's like, oh, now I get what was actually going on. Anyway.
Purposes, we are longer than a semi when we go down the road. So we basically take our, as you guys say, garage with us behind the trailer.
By the way, I don't understand this American thing in garage or... Anyway, I don't understand how I say garage. But anyway, apparently Australians say garage differently to Americans.
Yeah, because it's a good idea because, you know, like, I mean, I like the idea of the traveling mission. It kind of reminds me similar to what the Avatar group do, in that they like do a sort of touring Div 6 thing. I think it's a good idea. And also, I think if someone wants to just be an indie...
By the way, Avatar is another group that's you can get benefit from and stuff like that, because a guy, it's like half kind of like Scientology, is created by a former Scientologist, but it's also completely dodgy as well, and a lot of brainwashing and stuff like that. And I remember when I did the introductory course of Avatar, and there was a guy there who was doing it for the first time like I was, and he was reading it and he was like, this just doesn't make sense. And they were like, no, read it again and it makes sense, and or, you know, you just got to think about it. And what I know now is that if I was there, like, what I know now is I would have walked up to the guy and I would have said, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's just written shitly, and the guy, this is borderline a scam, basically. Like, you can get benefit from it, it's still borderline a scam. Like, you don't achieve what you're going to achieve. And like, he is an illogical person, the Harry Palmer who wrote this, and the sentence is just sort of illogical and retarded. And like, but what a lot of people do is that they read the sort of retarded sentence and they think, oh, maybe there's something I'm not getting, and then they just end up going, well, I'm just going to trust what the cult says or what the leader says. I'm just going to trust. And that's what happens in Avatar or in Scientology, the same thing. You just, when you get hit with something you don't quite understand, you just go, well, I've just got to have faith, and these people are nice, and so I'm going to trust with what they're saying. And this is why you get a lot of women involved with these cults, because they go off a lot. Women tend to follow leaders a lot. That's why they follow the government a lot, and a lot of women are leftists, because they're very much like, yeah, just go with the group and what the thingo says. And so you'll see, if you go to Avatar thing, you'll see more women volunteering than men and stuff like that, because they're going off this philosophy of, when they go and read it, they kind of don't really understand it, but they go, well, just trust what the leader says and trust authority and stuff like that. Anyway, but men are, it's funny seeing this other guy, because men are a lot more logical and they're more like scientific, and they're like, they have problems when the leader just says retarded shit. But it's quite obvious, because there's more women doing Scientology, but when you see Avatar, you'll see there's a lot of women. It's got a much more feminine vibe to the whole thing. It's very much like, oh, loving, and we're going to create a enlightened planetary society. And it's got like this, oh, it's really, oh, like green, pink, and like Buddhist, like it's really funny because they paint it with this Buddhist vibe. even though it doesn't have too much to do with Buddhism. It's just really, he's using it as sales, but like, and then Harry Palmer gets on the stage and he's like smiling, he's looking like he's out of it, and he's like, hi. It's just, and you hear, and when you hear about the stories behind the scenes, it's so similar to Scientology.
The auditor, then, I mean, that's a good idea for them as well. They could just travel around as an indie auditor.
Yeah. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's what I do. I do more auditing than I do anything else. The OT levels are considered courses. So in delivering those courses, you teach somebody how to audit the OT level, and then you deliver it to them. So you're doing both. I'd say that's probably 75-80% is the audit.
And can I also say, people don't get this, but Scientology sort of checks if the person's gullible from the beginning, because you tend to start with Dianetics. And I'm not saying that you can't go over incidents from the past and get benefit. Yes, you can, and psychology has been doing that since Freud or whatever. But what happens is people who have problems tapping into memories and are very factual don't tend to go on these wild adventures where they go into their past lives, but people learn in Scientology that it's cool to go into past lives, and they learn to imagine things. And like I'm saying, I'm not saying these things are all bullshit. I kind of believe in past lives, but they learn that it's okay to just start making shit up. Basically, they literally start learning that, and they learn it in the beginning of Scientology. So somebody who's not willing to put up with that, I had some problems with it. People who are quite factual and not as gullible with the sales techniques, because if someone's gullible from sales techniques and you tell them, like Hubbard tells them, you're going to have these past life memories, or you're going to have these memories of being in your mummy's stomach, those people, you then go into session with those people and they will have those memories come up. And it's only come up because you've told them that they're going to come up, right? Because they're gullible. Some people are like that. I'll give you a classic example. You could have, let's say you do tours of Bali, like you do tourist tours on a boat. You could design the shittest boat tour ever, but you could take a crowd of people and you could tell people this boat tour is the best. You're going to like love it. It's exciting, blah, 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 and show an ad for it. And it's like the best thing. And then you could go on the boat tour. The factual people will sit there and go at the end of it, that was the shittest boat tour I've ever been on. That ad was complete bullshit. The people who are gullible, right, and they suffer from the first form of placebo effect that I mentioned, they will literally come off that boat and go, oh, damn, that was so cool. Yeah, that was so great. What a fantastic afternoon. And it was like, what the fuck? Like, that person is a gullible person. Anyway, Scientology at the beginning, it like filters out the people who are not gullible, and the people who stay are the gullible people. And they learn that it's cool to run with your imagination, right? And they really get into the whole imagination thing. And then when they go and do their grades and they do the higher levels, they again go into imagination thing, because when they're doing the OT levels on the cans and they're looking for body thetans and stuff, a lot of the time I believe that they're just imagining shit. They're literally, and it's no different to when they were doing Dianetics years earlier. It's the same person sitting there just imagining stuff because Hubbard's told them to imagine stuff, right? Like, it's epic. It's amazing. You're thinking these people are spending hours and hours imagining shit, and it's like, whoa, right? And then you come along and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And you haven't been told, oh, Andy, this person's one of these gullible type people. These are the people that came off that shit boat ride and were like, that was great, you got to do the boat ride, yeah. And all the people who didn't like the boat ride walked off, right? And the people who did like the boat ride because they're gullible, they start selling tickets to the boat ride, and they start driving the boat, and they start being shipmen on the boat. And you see them and they're like, yeah, hey, come on the boat, man. It's a great boat ride. And they go, come watch this video. Yeah, it's great. And they go, come buy a ticket. And they're all smoking their own supply. They're all high on their own supply. Their heads far up their ass, and they're just gullible people. And you come along not knowing that all the factual people are gone. They left because the boat ride was shit. And so you think this is going to be a fantastic boat ride. Look at all this stuff. Look at all these people are saying. And then you get on the boat and you're like, what the fuck? That was a shit boat ride. What the fuck's going on? You need to know about the placebo effect and people who are gullible and affected by advertising. A classic example, maybe the boat ride one's too unbelievable to believe. I've done a lot of traveling. They do these things where they sell sunrise tours, right? There's like, I remember I went on one in Bali and I climbed a mountain and it was cool as hell, but you can do it during the middle of the day. You don't need to do it for sunrise. I mean, you see the sunset every day and it's just a sunset. And also, you rarely get to see the sun actually go down on the equator or whatever. I don't even know if that's the right word, but you see the sun go down, like you barely ever, usually there's clouds in the way or there's fog or something like that. But it's just the same when it's 6 a.m. and the sun's coming up. It's no different. It slowly gets brighter and then there's clouds and then it's bright. And it's like, why would you sell a sunrise tour? Because I went on this sunrise tour and like I had to wake up at like 3:30 a.m. And then by the time you actually get to the bottom of the mountain to start the walk, it's like 5 a.m. and then you slowly start walking with torches. And it throws your sleep cycle out of whack and it's all retarded. And it's also the coldest part of day in Bali, right? Even though it's a tropical place, the coldest time of the day is like 6 a.m. And you might actually need to put like a jacket on or something, which is just annoying because it's a tropical place. Anyway, there's no difference. You can do it at 9 a.m. You can do it at 3 p.m. It doesn't matter. Like, but they sell it as, oh, sunrise hike of Mount Bantua. Oh, cool. They did the same thing with Angkor Wat. Like, I visited this, like, ancient temple thing. And, you know, like, you get there. And what was so boring is that it's, like, pitch black. And then you wait. And, of course, it's, like, half an hour before any light even occurs. And then you have to buy shit like coffees because you're bored. And then they make money off selling you coffees. And then you wait, and then it slowly gets bright, and you're like, and when the sun comes up, you don't see it coming up as a ball because there's cloud coverage. So you just see it get bright, and you're like, wow, was that really worth a cold ride on a motorbike? Waking up so early to get here. It's like, I'm not buying any of the sunrise bullshit. Sunrises aren't amazing and romantic, and we see sunsets every day. And if we want to do something involving the sun going down, we can do it in the evening, and we can see it go down. It's freaking advertising, but there are some people who will tell you, they'll go, oh, I climbed that mountain in Bali and I went to the sunrise mountain and wow, whoa, sunrise, so cool, romantic. And you're like, oh, this is one of those people that's gullible. And Christians do a similar thing as well. They, some of them believe they've been changed by Christianity and they've been washed by the blood of Christ. And they're smoking their own supply. They're just off with it. And so anyway, that's what's going on with Scientology.
Auditing part.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm like, unless you're
So what I was saying is that Scientology filters out the people who are quite factual because they're not willing to go along with just silliness, and they Hubbard just changes the form of the silliness that you're doing. So you're doing Dianetics, and then you're doing some other form of silliness, and then you're doing these things where you're holding on to cans looking for body thetans, and he just keeps on coming up with new forms to keep this gullible person into Scientology and paying for courses and shit like that. And it's like, once you've got somebody who is one of these gullible type people who suffer from the placebo effect, the first form, it's like you rub your hands together. As a salesman, you're like, oh, this person's great. We've got to keep this person around. And you can just milk them like a cow because they're just gullible, right? And you hope that they get an inheritance, and then you can get all their money from their inheritance. And that's how it really works. That's how Hubbard was thinking. I'm not kidding. And he also believes there's nothing wrong with that because he thinks that stupid people are like cows that are to be milked. Like, that's how the world is. And if you've got a higher level intelligence, then there's nothing wrong with you taking their money because they're not going to do anything impressive with it anyway because they're just dumb. So this is the sort of shit Hubbard really thinks. If you had sat down and had a conversation, he would laugh about, you know, how people just keep on buying his shit. And that's why when you read the OT3 story, you're like, either Hubbard really believe this, or he's just completely selling people a bullshit story, right? And I think, and I'll never really know the answer to this, but I think it's a bit of both. I definitely believe Hubbard believed a bit in spirits, and because he was hearing voices because he was a nutter. Nutters hear voices, and so he was thinking it's body thetans and stuff like that. It's absolute fact. There are people who are... Anyway, it's like if something fucked up with you, then you're in a psych ward and you're hearing voices. But if you're normal, you're not hearing them, okay? So you can wonder... It's not surprising that Hubbard came up with this shit because he's gone, okay? I don't hear voices. And so, yeah, I think that's all I want to say.
Maybe Clearwater or LA or something where, you know, you can make a living off just being in that area. Imagine you have
were
to
there this last winter.
Yeah, imagine you have to travel around, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there aren't a ton of people that want services in the field, but those that do really want it. It's a difficult thing for people. There's a lot of handlings that need to be done, and you have to wear a lot of hats in order to survive in the field.
Yeah, and Scientology, I mean, hopefully in the future it gets bigger, but at the moment it's more like, yeah, you know, you're going to have a handful of people here and there, but it's not like, you know, this booming thing at the moment.
Scientology is never going to get big because the problem is that because essentially it's kind of a scam, the truth gets out now on the internet. So, and also, regardless, the truth is already out even if it was on the internet. Because how scams work is you come up with a scam and you trick people, you trick people and you can keep it going, but at some point the lie gets exposed and then it's like, oh, and then it's like it's done now. You have to move it to a new area. And that's what Scientology has done. It's moved it to like Taiwan. They got a bunch of Chinese people. And then it moved it to Russia. And then you got a bunch of Russian people because it got successful there. And that's why I went to St. Hill recently. I pretended to be somebody interested in Scientology. And who confronted me at the gate was a Russian person volunteering, not an English person, because the English people in general have just woken up to Scientology. So it's like they're not going to get recruits from England. But they had a recruit from Russia because it was a new scam in Russia. So you have to continually bring scams to new areas and trick people. And anyway, but the problem is in the West, the cat's out of the bag on Scientology. People know. And you'll notice that Scientology was, I mean, the prices got put up and it got heavy ethics and stuff like that, which put people off. But Scientology started getting quiet in the 80s. It was in the early 80s and the 70s, it was really exciting and booming, and it was part of that whole counterculture and stuff. But it started phasing away, and a lot to do with that was that a lot of people had gotten up to the high levels and blown the whistle and just said, yeah, it's shit. So, anyway.
Where you can just stay in one location.
Yeah, we're trying to stitch things together and create a community over time. We've been doing this, it'll be 4 years this coming October that we've been delivering.
And by the way, like I'm saying, I mean, you can get benefit from Scientology, but I know of a girl who has done heaps of Scientology and apparently done pretty much all you can do in Ronsorg. So, you know, because Ronsorg has OT 30, 40, 50, because when Captain Bill kept on creating tech, he took the same thing Hubbard was doing, where he just kept on inventing shit and more things to do, and it just keeps on going. It goes up to like OD 40 or something. It's just crazy. Anyway, but what's this girl doing now? And she's into other alternative therapies. And I mean, I don't blame her because it's cool, but like I assume that the reason she's into other alternative therapies is because she isn't this perfect, immortal, godlike being. She probably still gets tired in the afternoon, or she probably still has some wrinkles, or she probably has maybe some upset or something like that. But that's the end result of Scientology. You do it for years and years and years, and you're not this perfect person that you've been sold on, and then you end up moving into trying other things. And I just think do it for like 5 years and then move on to something else, because it doesn't really work. You know, that you don't have to go all the way up to OT 40 to find that out, you know. And just the fact that she is doing other things, other health things is just evidence that it's obviously not working. It never really worked.
Slowly but surely, I see an improvement as far as the number of people that are reaching and everything like that. Maybe that has to do more with the outflow that I've done. I don't know, but the podcasts have helped a lot, not just mine, but yours, David's on Scientolopedia.
And Scientology has a lot, because this is back when I believed in Scientology, so I cared about it. Scientology has a lot to do with you really believing that it works. And if you smash that illusion that the person has, that it works, then it all just crumbles down, because the person's no longer willing to volunteer or no longer willing to pay a lot for the courses. It all relies on people thinking it actually works. When you see the staff walking into those Scientology buildings working for like barely any money, and when you see people busting their balls and sitting there on the cans for hours and hours and hours, they're all under the illusion that it really works. And when you smash that and you say, dude, come here, this guy's OT5, look at him, look at what he's done, look at how he is in life. You know, the illusion shattered. A classic example is Tom Cruise. Let's look at Tom Cruise. But because you've heard the video where he did that funny rant during COVID, where it was on a work set during COVID and he was yelling at his staff. That doesn't sound very clear to me. That doesn't sound very happy and enlightened and positive to me. And he's yelling at his staff like that, interpolating them, using interpolation to control them. Does he even follow Scientology? What about Science of Survival? Doesn't it say you don't use anger to control people? But it's not just Tom Cruise that does that. It's also the leader of Scientology, and it's also the previous leader of Scientology, L.Ron Hubbard. He used anger as well, and it was all bullshit, and he knew it was bullshit. Like, he just talks shit. When you listen to Hubbard and you read his books, understand that this guy is a shit talker, supreme shit talker. So, and a lot of people will say, this is why people do mental gymnastics, and they go, well, Tom Cruise isn't perfect because he did the old tech. And then you go, well, I just gave you an example 2 minutes ago of the girl who's done the new independent Scientology that's been fixed up and corrected by Captain Bill. And she's gotten up to OT40. And after that, she's still doing self-help stuff, because obviously she's not a godlike perfect person, because it hasn't really worked, has it? You know what I mean? And it's like, and not only that, I mean, you can hear stories of people when you look into, when I was doing this interview, I was first getting into independent Scientology, and I hadn't been around it for years enough to find out that also independent Scientology is bullshit. Because you leave, you realize there's a problem with Scientology in the church, and you leave, and then in the independent Scientology, you get sold the idea that it's chairman of the board who screw all the tech, and that's why things aren't working, and that's why it's bad. But we've got the right tech in independent Scientology. But then you do independent Scientology for like 5 years, the same as you did it in the church for 5 years, and then you find out, oh no, it still just doesn't work. And so that's basically how it is,
It's just there are a lot more people kind of stitching things together to create a world community vis-a-vis the internet that I think is helping a lot pull some of the people out of their shells and out of the re-stimulation that they find themselves sitting and getting out of the church.
Yeah, I think the internet's really helped the indie movement, because it brings up the comm level and people can find out what's going on. I mean, with my day job, it's pretty damn simple in that I can just do letterbox drops basically, or send out text messages to customers, and that keeps me busy. So my create on it is just, a bit of text messages or flyers. And as long as I just do a good job, then people are always calling me.
So I just thought of something. It's not really relevant, but I just spoke with a girl because I was listening to her book. She's a famous activist called Monica Smith. And she was a famous freedom activist during the lockdowns here in Melbourne, because we had the biggest lockdowns in the world and the government were just completely off the rails. And of course, the church went along with it and got their staff vaccinated and didn't challenge the whole COVID thing, and they were just limpy faggots basically. And it's just It's disgraceful, really. And I'm sure that woke up a lot of people to the truth about the Church of Scientology when they saw how the church totally did what the government said. And when I was in St. Hill recently, when I visited them, because I was pretending to be new to Scientology, I just wanted to see how my results were on the personality test and stuff like that. And the staff said, test. Oh, COVID test. And then I couldn't even believe that the staff brought up COVID, because COVID was so long ago. But the fact that COVID test came into their mind, and I saw some COVID paraphernalia on their reception desk, it was still in their universe. Anyway, basically, St. Hill, and it was all the Scientology centers, they were so heavy on COVID. They were more heavy than what the government required. Anyway, they just went along with it like puppets because they're in bed with the government. That's the real truth about Scientology, which you'll find out more. I've got something coming out in the future more about that. But Scientology is a front group of the CIA. Hubbard was working for the CIA. He was doing contract missions for the CIA, okay? You want to know the real truth about Scientology? It is kind of a fake religion because it's covering the real purpose of it, and that is to do ops for the CIA, spying ops and shit like that, and also to make money for Hubbard as well. And Scientology isn't the only religion that's connected to the CIA. The Red Cross is so many things. Russia knows all about it. Russia have Freemasonry banned because they know it's connected to the CIA, and they have other charities, US wink wink charities, because they're connected with I'm writing a book about Scientology and the CIA, and it's going to be short, succinct, and it's going to have all the evidence you need to find out the truth about Scientology being involved with the CIA. And in that, it's going to blow your mind because it goes into many of the other things, not just Scientology. I briefly mentioned all these other things that the CIA are involved with, and it's just the government's fingers are in every pie. The government's the biggest cult, the biggest organization you've ever heard of. You don't understand how big the government is. Trump's involved with the government. Alex Jones is involved with the government. The lefties are involved with the government. The righties are involved with the government. The government is just epic empire that's got all these things infiltrated. Anyway, I'm going off topic, but I was talking to this activist, and I was listening to her book, and in the book it comes up that she worked for Scientologists in Melbourne. And that's when I messaged her and said, hey, which Scientologist were you working for? And she mentioned how in the book that she got fired by these Scientologists because she was a stoner, basically. And it's kind of funny because I said to her, firstly, I'm not surprised that they fired you because they probably thought that you were beyond being repaired. And secondly, it's so typical that they would fire you because it's just so hypocritical, because Scientology is supposed to be able to cure drug addicts. Can it cure drug addicts or can't it? This is where Scientology is full of shit, because you'll find out when you look into Scientology, they have these courses to cure mental illness or cure drug addicts. And then sometimes they just, if they've got someone who's difficult, they just get rid of them and they don't even bother trying, because it's why? Because it's deep down, they know it doesn't work. Yet they tell people Narconon has a 90% success rate, and it's just some false statistic. And it's yeah, right. I mean, they're doing drugs in the Narconon facility, and it's the real success rate of Narconon is 25%. But they couldn't sell you $300 an hour if it was only had a success rate of 25%. Do you understand? So they upped the success rate to 85%, right? And then people will actually fork out $300 to save their child who's a drug addict. See how it's all bullshit? Anyway, come up to an hour, but I've been talking too much. But I'm going to continue playing it, but I'm going to end soon, okay?
So with your job, because it's different, is the create hard? Is it a grind being an indie auditor?
It is extremely tough.
Wow.
There are...
Actually, I'll go for an hour and a half. I'll make this video an hour and a half.
A lot of issues that you have to deal with in the field. One would think, well, you find a CS and you go out and you get to know them, they get to know you, that sort of thing. I wish that were the case. There are varying degrees of people that are case supervisors or auditors. To be honest with you, all case supervisors are auditors, but actually meeting somebody like me, like if I was a zebra, I've yet to meet another zebra. I'm the only zebra I've run into, other than if I went to go get audited myself, say like with Trey Lots, for example, or something like that. We never cross paths. The only things people that I do into is CSs, and they're all different. They all do different things differently because.
And so now that I know what I know, what I'll say that Jonathan Burke is trying to explain is that everyone interprets the tech differently because it's written vaguely. So this is why Jonathan's probably having problems where he disagrees with this auditor and that CS, and I can't work with that one because of blah, 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 blah. And that's what you find out when you look at a lot of these Scientologists. Because the tech is so vague, people interpret it differently, and they say, oh, that person's a squirrel and that person's a squirrel. And there's all this stupid infighting going on in Scientology, and it's because people interpret it differently. And it's because Hubbard wrote it in a shit way. You know, you can write notes on how to clean a car, and if you write it in a vague way, people are going to interpret it differently and clean the car in a different way. And then a lot of the time, people fuss over the note and don't think for themselves because they don't understand that it doesn't really matter. Like, just go there and start cleaning and try and work out what you think it is and just do it or whatever. That's probably what you should do, because if you're going to do it wrong, what does it matter? Like, it doesn't really work anyway. I mean, that's one thing. People are like, they've been so sold that Scientology is correct and scientific. They think it's really an exact science because Hubbard says it's an exact science. So they really fuss over, is this the instructions? This is what I do as a CS. It's not an exact science. It's vague and it like barely works anyway. And so when you know the real truth about it, I could probably make a great Scientologist because I know how silly it is, and I could treat it in a lot more casual way and could actually. But when people try and be real anal and exact, and I need to look up the meaning of this word in 10 dictionaries and it fucks it all up, you know?
Because of when they got out, which is a crucial subject that people need to understand. Because all CSs do things differently based off of the technology and the degree of where it was changed at the time, which is crucial for somebody who's a field auditor, because if you don't mesh up, or let's say they're used to behaving like they were in the Sea Org and it was really crappy for them, they're going to treat you crappy. That's been one of my experiences.
So is it basically the change?
Yeah, and people in Scientology, because the church is heavy, they learn toxic, especially a Sea Org, they learn toxic ways of dealing with people, which you could say come from COB, but it comes from Hubbard. It goes further back to Hubbard. He was treating people in a toxic way because he was a toxic person. People can't handle the truth about Hubbard. That's why you've got to get to, like I'm saying, the two ways to really expose Scientology is really look into clear and OT and if they can actually be achieved, and it would shatter your illusion. And then also really look into Hubbard, his personality, and you'll realize, whoa, I was really tricked by a salesman. He's a 1-1. You have to face the facts that he's a 1-1. I mean, his kid committed suicide because Hubbard wasn't loving and caring to him because he was gay and stuff like that. And it's crazy.
Jimmy, is it to keep the tech good? Is that the challenge of it?
Well, yeah, that's the challenge, because let's say I did my Scientology training in '88. I got some more training after the Golden Age of Tech came out, which I thought was a bit poisoned, if you will. And then I got my internship for knots and everything in the field just a couple of years ago. And that went very well. And with the same CS, that same CS later that year ended up sleeping with my PC, who was a foreign language PC and spoke Spanish, and I didn't speak English. And the whole thing just blew up in a big fireball.
Oh, so you can have dramas coming.
And what I'm thinking now when I'm hearing this is like, yeah, some drama popped up, but him trying to use sleeping as the reason for the drama, I don't know, trying to make out that it's sex or whatever. There's probably a whole other backstory as to what caused the drama to blow up. And they sort of latch on to, well, someone had sex with someone and there's a rule that you're not supposed to do that, and that created the problem. And it's just like, well, maybe it did, but also hearing that, I'm a bit more skeptical. I'm a bit more like, there could be other reasons why it blew up.
I'm into it.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And this was a person that was in the Sea Org for years at Flag. So these sorts of things happen, and you don't see them coming, and it's like a bus blindsiding you in the middle of the road on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah. Well, what about finding PCs? Is that annoying, having to create on that? Is that hard, or?
Well, there are a lot of people that start from the bottom and audit people, handle their drug issues and things like that in the field, and then bring them up through the grades and everything like that. I don't have a lot of interest in that. I haven't had a lot of pleasant experiences with drug cases. I can handle drug cases, but when they haven't had any auditing.
I remember when I was interviewing Jonathan Burke back during this period, and he didn't like independent Scientologists talking about the O2 levels on the internet, because what he ran into as a problem was that people would get exposed to that information, and then they'll be harder to do Scientology on, to audit or teach or whatever, to do courses with. And I didn't get how it would make it harder, because I was like, but this is just information. Like, how is it going to make it, like, you can just talk to them and handle whatever question they have. But now I'm kind of thinking that what it could be is that if they, let's say they heard me say how Dianetics is a lot of the time just imagination. I mean, once someone knows that, and I explained to you the placebo effect, once you know that, I could imagine how you could then go to Jonathan and try and get audited, and that's going to be difficult after you know the scam of it, basically, after you know that you could just be imagining shit completely, and it could be the placebo effect, right? Like, I understand how John was running into problems, and it's like, he's not going to say, because he doesn't even know, he's not going to say, Andy, don't talk about the O2 levels on the internet because you're exposing our scam. He's not going to say that. He's going to say, well, you shouldn't talk about it because it's high level tech and you're not ready for it and it causes problems. Because I remember pushing him going, but how is it causing... I wanted to get the reason as to why it was difficult to deal with people who had heard OT data on the internet. I was like, but how is it difficult? Like I didn't get it. But now I'm starting to get it. I think it's because it... right now, I couldn't really do Scientology. If I went in and literally did it, because I'll be seeing on the cans and I'll be like, I'd know that so many things are ridiculous, so I'd just be sitting there, and either I could do it really quick because I could just because I could know what to say and think, like from a fake sort of acting point of view, so I could skip through it really fast, or I couldn't even get past the first thing. It would be either one or the other, because I'd just sit there and I'd be like, look, I do not remember anything prior to age 2.5 when I remember crashing that cycle at the playground at the doctor's. I can remember that memory. That's it. I can remember getting stung by a bee around that age. I can't remember anything else. And I'm not going to sit here and talk shit and talk about hearing noises in my mummy's stomach and stuff like that because I've heard that from Hubbard. Because if I'd never been told that, I never would have thought of that. I never would have thought of being in my mother's stomach. I never would have thought of being on some random planet and pulling the air cover off a planet, right? These sorts of things have just been, it's front loading. It's just bullshit. It's very likely to be bullshit. But I'm not saying that some people don't actually tap into some memory from 200 years ago. Sometimes it can happen and it can be legit. But I can't, and some people have the ability to do it. It's remote viewing. Some people are psychic. It's legit. It's rare, but it's legit. Maybe it's 1% of the population. Ingo Swann legitimately was psychic. He could close his eyes and he could focus on the spot on the moon and actually get data from that spot on the moon. Like he could go, let's say there's a crater on the moon called John's Crater. He could literally go, okay, and start perceiving correct data from that crater and be like, oh, I see a round rock and blah, 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 blah. And then they can fact check it with satellites and he can actually get it. He was a freak. He actually had that ability. Do you understand? But most people don't have that ability. It's extremely rare. Okay? So he could remote view, and he could remote view psychically his time track. So it's possible he could look at his past life and go, oh, I was like this dude riding a bike in Germany or something like that. He could actually tap into that and see those memories. Other people don't have that ability. And when you look into these people who can remote view, which when remote viewing is very similar to auditing, it's basically the same thing, moving on the time track, right? You find out Ingo Swann was gay. You find out a lot of these guys are gay. And when you look into other people who have psychic abilities, you find out they tend to have bluish eyes. And you also find that they have genetic problems, or they're not the full dollar, right? Because I'm not going to mention the truth about gays, but you can connect the dots of what I'm trying to imply is that they're faulty products, basically. And that's why they're wired incorrectly. We've been wired, the bodies here on this earth have been wired to not have these psychic abilities. And sometimes you can get a little bit lucky. Sometimes you can predict it when a friend calls you up or something like that. But if you don't have it, you don't have it. And some of these people, these funky people with some errors, they can actually properly remote view and have that ability. And that's awesome. And sometimes people can gain that ability because they can have a crazy car crash and then next minute they can remote view and it's like, whoa. Next minute they can be out of their body and perceive things. And it's like, wow. Because they got smashed and it made them faulty in the car crash. And then after that, they had the ability, right? But if you're a normal person and you just can't tap into these early memories when you try, there's no point in pushing further. You don't have that genetic ability. You don't have the special ability. And when someone asks you to go into past life, you're just going to end up making shit up, pretty much. Anyway, and even if you do go into your past life, do you ever become clear? No. You might have to tap into some cool memory as a once-off or something like that. And I don't mind my attempts at trying to do Dianetics. They were interesting. But at the end of the day, is it worth all that money and effort? Because clear can't be achieved. People just don't achieve the state of clear. Show me the person who's clear. You can't. You know, Hubbard talks shit. People cannot believe that Hubbard just made up clear and made up that he'd ordered all these people to clear in 1950 when he wrote it in his book. Hubbard vomits shit out of his mouth. When you think of Hubbard, think of Trump and his sales talk and the way how Trump goes, oh, the biggest and the best and the most amazing. And all the politicians do it, but Trump does it to the 10th degree. He goes, when I had the economy in 2019, it was the biggest, best economy in the world. And it was like the most amazing thing ever. And all the politicians say it. And they just talk utter shit. Like they dribble, it's sales talk and lawyers and sleazy talk, and they dribble it out of their mouth. And Trump does it massively. And anyway, Hubbard does it. He's the same personality. They just vomit it out of their mouth. They just lie like you wouldn't believe. And they're so convincing. They're so charming. And anyway.
I mean, you're really dealing with the raw PC, and you need the infrastructure of an organization, not just 2 or 3 people, but you need 7, 8 to 10 people to be able to handle that. You've got to have a chaplain. You need, whether anybody likes this or not, you need an ethics officer to deal with drug cases, alcohol cases as well. Sometimes they're rougher than drug cases more often than not. So, you know, it just varies from person to person, but being trained in knots and the upper levels, I tend to attract those people, but I also tend to attract people who have clear issues, who were either clear in the church or their past life clears. I've had close to a dozen people like that in the last 4 years.
So he's having issues with clears. Yeah, because they're never clear and it's just in the person's imagination. It's sales talk. They've been tricked. Okay?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the alcohol thing, because I noticed that when I was in the Melbourne church, that alcoholics can be quite problematic. And I'm just interested in what your opinion of this is. I noticed with this alcoholic was it like So they'll be clean for a bit, and then they'll go and drink alcohol again, and then they'll go to ethics, and then they'll do a program ethics, and then they'll go along with all right, and then suddenly they'll drink again, and then they'll go to ethics again, and it was I thought it was really silly because I just saw the person just do the same thing again and again until ethics.
See this story I'm telling? Because it doesn't work. Whether it's the ethics tech or the auditing tech, the person's not changing. They're not getting improved. They just keep on having the same problem again and again and again. It's all handling the wrong why. A big thing that will wake you up to the truth about Scientology, I do think it is a data evaluator's course, because the course is basically a fact-checking course. It sort of teaches you how to fact-check. It makes you aware that, oh, you have to check the accuracy of information. And when it comes to the news, I mean, the news and politicians, like I'm saying, lawyers, they vomit out dodgy things. They either exaggerate something or under-exaggerate something, and it's non-stop. So when I'm watching the news, I'm laughing all the time because it's a comedy for me, because I'm just hearing just utter rubbish that they're talking and they just vomit it out and stuff like that. Like Trump saying that America's going to take over Gaza. It's like America already took over Gaza. It took over Gaza using Israel, their puppet, because America and England, the West, created Israel as a country, and that country started taking over that area instead of actual British and American troops doing it. They just did it through Israeli troops. They just switched the signs, the flags, but it's the same network that control it. It doesn't matter. So now Trump's like, well, now we're going to take over Gaza. It's like, you already had Gaza, and the Israeli government say with Gaza that Gaza was a Palestinian area, and it's like, okay, so you pushed all the Arabs into the Gaza area, and then you said that's your area, Palestine, and it's like, no, it wasn't. You were controlling everything going in and out of that area. I mean, I've been to West Bank in Israel. You go into West Bank, and it's still under the control of Israel. It's just that it's an area for the Muslims. It doesn't mean that that area is independent and free. When you scan your passport out of the West Bank into Jordan, of course you've got Israeli soldiers and Israeli government thingos. Like, it's like, this is where you just see lie upon lie and twisting of facts and vomiting of bullshit out on all these levels. Anyway, I don't know how I got onto this, but anyway.
So I'm not going to drink or whatever, and I'll just be thinking, they're going to drink again. And so I kind of thought, I just thought, what the hell is the handling of
I think people can't understand what's going on in the world because they can't understand how dodgy people are and how much lies are just vomited out. But when you master that, like COVID was a big lesson. Remember what they did with COVID, right? When you see how they're willing to just do the biggest lies and most ridiculous things and just vomit it out, then you can see through their tactic and how they use it permanently. It's a constant tactic. It's like how we use bricks to build homes. That's just what they do. Weatherboard homes. It's just constantly, it's in use all the time. It's completely normal.
I mean, my opinion was, just chuck them in session, keep them going up the bridge, and just stop the stupid ethics thing, because it's not working continually sending them to ethics, because they just don't obey it.
Well, Pierre Ethier, who is a plus 12 in Toronto, I went to visit him to do some auditing with him.
In case you're wondering what I've been doing since I've been making this Scientology podcast, it has been a lot of traveling, and you learn so much from traveling the world. Like, let's just that example I gave you with the Israeli thing, and it's like, I wish I got to visit Gaza. I didn't visit Gaza. I didn't know what was coming, but it was starting to heat up when I was there, but this was just before the war broke out. There's so much to learn, and you can just see through things, and I'm really happy because I could have gone backpacking when I was 21, and I actually chose to do Scientology instead, and that got me just distracted. But if I'd gone when I was 21, I think I wouldn't have been able to see what was really going on, and it would have gone over my head. But now that I went when I'm older and knew all this stuff, backpacking was great because I got to just see through all the bullshit. I could understand it.
And we were having a conversation over dinner, and I was really surprised what he said on this. And at the time, I didn't really have a whole lot of experience with alcohol cases versus drug cases. Most of mine were just drug cases that I had audited. And his opinion was that the alcohol cases were much more difficult to deal with than the drug cases. And honestly, I found that to be true, and I don't disagree with you.
There's one thing I want to say about drugs and alcohol cases as well, is that the person's broken. They're not the full dollar, let's be honest here. And they're going to run into problems, and they're going to label, this is just what I'm thinking as I'm watching this, they're going to label it on the tech, or the tech being done wrong, or mistakes, or something like that. But if you just know that the person's faulty, and this is just how they are naturally, then you're not going to start thinking it's something you've done wrong with the tech.
I've seen that delirium tremens of, it's easy to say you're sorry after you do it sort of a thing with an alcoholic, and then they fall off of the wagon. But it's
like, for example, the alcoholic falling off the wagon. So they'll be doing Scientology, then they'll jump back into the booze and get drunk or something like that. And then you'll think, oh, I did Scientology wrong. Now we need to do a repair list or go to ethics and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, the person's an alcoholic. They're a broken, faulty person. That's just what they do. You could have done nothing wrong with the tech. That's just how the person is. But, of course, they'll have to go through and do all the stupid shit that Scientology will make them do, and then they'll get back onto doing their Scientology processing, and it was just a waste of time, because you just have to understand the person's faulty. It's just...
the cat chasing its tail, because you have this issue of ethics needs to be in for the tech to go in. And so the ethics goes in, and then the tech goes in a little bit, and then their ethics go out. And basically what it is they're PTS to alcohol. And that is something that's been overlooked. And alcoholic, LRH says, is a forgetter. They're trying to forget something. So there needs to be an undercut.
Scientology has all these fancy terms and fancy ideas and all this sort of stuff. But it's simply this. The person's broken. Maybe their body's not absorbing the right form of a vitamin, or they've got some bug in their stomach or something. But, alcohol makes them feel good, and they can't stop. And they're hooked on it. That's it. I mean, we don't need any fancy explanation, all that sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's also is a forgetter, because they might have been... they might not have a body problem, and they might have been abused or something like that when they were younger, and they're using alcohol to forget. But anyway, I'm just trying to say that you get into Scientology and you hear all these fancy ideas, and it's like, oh, wow, the person's PDS to alcohol, and oh, what's that? Oh, what's PDS to alcohol mean? Oh, and you get like, and it's just like, whatever.
Whatever it is that they're trying to forget, and one for one, they're always trying to forget something. So there's
Scientologists always explain things in Scientology terms. If you were talking to a biologist, they would explain everything in biology terms. The thing is, to come to the truth, I would recommend studying everything and then hearing the answer of the person who studied all the things and what they say.
Whether an engram, a secondary, a lock, or all of these.
Because you can tell whether they're a Scientologist or a Christian. You can tell how far their head's up their ass, how far they're into the bubble of Christianity or Scientology by how they answer questions. Because a Christian will say, it's demons that's making them drink. And so, like, they all have their own different ideas.
It's beneath that, and you really need
to... someone might say they're a Christian, but if they don't say wanky Christian answers like that, they're not really a Christian. You can tell if someone's like, they're a Christian just because their parents went to church or something like that. Or they might be a Scientologist just because they got brought up in it, but they're not really believers. The people who are real believers are people when you talk about something and they somehow relate it to Scientology or they relate it to Christianity, and then you're like, oh, wow, yeah, this person's really caught up in the Scientology brainwashing or the Christian brainwashing. They're really caught up in the bubble because they see everything in the world with Christian goggles on,
Forgive the term, take baby steps.
So basically, actually, this video I'm making is me viewing Scientology with my Scientology goggles, because I had the church goggles, pulled them off, and then I had independent Scientology goggles, and then now they're pulled off. Right? So that's how I'm viewing all this. And so it's all about these goggles,
Do it gradiently to get them off of it. and get them a Purif as quick as possible. Auditing isn't a first solution for an alcoholic. Getting them a Purif and getting them objectives primarily. Those are the two things that
you know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Purif is a lot of stress. And when the person goes in to do their Purif, they're going to want to hit the bottle when they're on the Purif because it's the stress from the Purif. You know, you can look up thingos where people take the supplement NAC and they're like, wow, my addictions went away. You know, maybe they need to take the supplement NAC and then they won't have the addiction, you know?
Work, but a lot of people don't have time for a Purif, so shortcuts are made, especially in the church.
And the whole of the Purif is like, the philosophy behind the Purif is you accumulate toxins, you get them out of your system, you live for like 25 years, and you do the Purif again because you accumulated toxins, blah, blah, blah. There are so many toxins that you need to do Purifs all the time, but that's impractical. So what you do is you do what I do, which is like you take, you always do detoxing. So I always, I do multiple Bikram yogas a week because you can literally smell chemicals come out of you when you do Bikram yoga. So I'm always on a Purif. I'm always constantly watching my detox levels. And I can tell when I don't do detoxing things, like, because I go to saunas as well. And I can tell when I'm accumulating toxins because I can smell the sweat that comes out of me and it's toxic, but I feel a certain way, case-wise. You can use Scientology words case-wise. I feel a certain way, and I know that, I've got to get my detoxing going. I've got to get back on top of it. So I don't believe in the Purif anymore because I believe that you should be on a permanent Purif for the rest of your life. You should always be continually detoxing, and one of the best ways is by going, I would say do 2 Bikram yogas a week and 1 steam sauna and dry sauna. And that's pretty good. That's good for your health and it's good stretching and that'll help get toxins out of you. And then also it's a matter of not exposing yourself to toxic things because there might be someone listening to this who works as a painter. That's just a toxic bomb. I don't know how the hell you could work as a painter. I mean, you're just getting exposed to chemicals every day.
If I had an alcoholic that was like that, I would make sure they did a Purif first and then did their objectives, straight water and so on, just like the standard bridges.
Yeah, so you would, you know, after you see that ethics...
All right, so I'm at an hour and a half. I'm actually going to keep on going to an hour and 45. I'm just so into this at the moment.
A few times, you'd obviously think that the bridge will handle this person's case? Or a special program will handle the case, or...
A special program would handle the case. I mean, depending on what you found out in the DFP interview and things like that. And every case is different, yet every case
Look,
is
I'll
different.
give you an example. Like, people go to Scientology because they've got some emotional problem. Do you know what I've got, like, and they think it's going to help them? It's like, there's so much more going on. For example, I've got these little glasses, and you put them on, and they look like sunglasses, but they flash a light, right? And you have your eyes closed, and they flash the light when you're wearing the glasses. And what that does is it's basically exercising your pineal gland, and it's activating it, right? And I've experimented with myself and with my dad. If you do that for like half an hour, the next day you feel good. I'm not kidding. I remember sitting there with my dad, and I was like, I feel good. And my dad was like, yeah, I feel good too. I was like, yeah, it must have been that thing that we did, because, I mean, I own these glasses now, but you can go to places where they have a brighter form of it, and they have like a thing, and they put it right near your face, and it flashes, right? And so it's like 3 times the power of the little cheap glasses I've got. But I do it every day, the glasses thing, because it's like every day a little bit is probably just as good as once a week doing a big flashy thing. And basically, it's waking up your pineal gland, and it's getting your serotonin and melatonin activated, right? And it's getting your hormones functioning, because there are some people who walk around and they're feeling great and happy all the time. You don't realize it's because they've got the right chemicals going on. They've got their pineal gland is producing the right chemicals in the right amounts, and you're supposed to just be happy and good. And then you can have someone who's feeling miserable all the time, and it's because their pineal gland isn't firing and isn't producing these chemicals. So what makes us happy? Chemicals, literally chemicals in the body. There's this whole idea of mental illness not being a chemical imbalance is incorrect. It is a chemical imbalance, like literally, and you can prove it with these glasses, you know? And so you know, I mean, I guess I got to get to the bottom of the why of why me and my dad, when our pineal glands get activated, why we then feel better the next day. Do we naturally have shit functioning pineal glands? Is there some sort of diet problem where my body is struggling to produce the right hormones from my diet and I need to adjust my diet and then I won't have to use the flashy thing to feel good? And another effect of the flashy thing is that I have better dreams because it wakes up the melatonin. It gets your pineal gland produces the melatonin, and melatonin makes you dream. But there's all these things that are going on. See how complex the body is? And then someone will think, oh, you know, I'm feeling bad. I've got to go and talk about an engram where I was walking on a planet in my past life. And it's like, nah, dude, like your pineal gland's not functioning, you know? Like there's more to it.
The same. So I think the first thing would be get them a little lash repair if you can and keep them on the wagon and then get them into the box, get them and get them a really good bank of objectives and keep the ARC high. Because the problem with alcoholics is there's usually an issue with some sort of ARC.
Oh, another classic example. I mean, you'll come across this. I mean, it happens to men. It sort of happens to me as well. But it happens to women mainly, but it sort of happens to me. And that would be, you've got a girl in their mid-30s who's single and hasn't had a kid. And she's sitting in the chair there, and you're going to go order her on Scientology, and she's sad. I mean, we all know why she's sad, because she's not married and she doesn't have a kid. And her biology is screaming at her, get married, have a fucking kid. That's what our bodies have been programmed to do. And she's going to feel lonely and like a loser if she doesn't get married and have a kid. And she's worried because her eggs are getting old and she won't be able to have a kid. So obviously, she's sitting there and she's sad. Now, do you think that's because her pineal gland isn't firing? Probably not. Do you think it's because she needs to do her objectives? Maybe not. Do you think she needs to do a purif? Do you think, what do you think? And how would you solve her problem? You know, because I don't know, I would feel if I was there as an auditor auditing her, I'd just be like, I'd probably say you need to get schooled on how to find a partner or something like that, you know? But there's just all these things going on, and somebody who doesn't know what's going on was probably working at a Scientology center, and they've got this sad 35-year-old woman, and they're like, oh, she's red tagged, or oh, we need to put her on the purif, or oh, don't worry, we'll get her on the objectives. And it's like, no, she needs to not be here. She needs to go and get impregnated, pretty much. She needs to go and find a guy because her biology is screaming out to her. That's why she's sad, you know? But that's what's going on. These are the things, all the things I know now. And then, I watch these things and you're like, these are the things I think.
Tend to ARC break really easy. So you got to keep that ARC high and keep your TRs in and be patient because that's really the only way to handle them. In my experience, drug cases are easier.
Well, it's interesting because this alcohol example is similar to other
so
things.
I don't mean to be, this is a bit rude to Jonathan because I didn't want him to watch this, but when you hear Scientologists say things, this is what I think. Wank, wank. You just think, oh, fucking wank. You sort of roll your eyes yeah, all right. Because he was saying something about how, the alcoholic has an ARC break, and you're like, it sounds so technical and fancy, and it's like, ARC break. It's like, they're an idiot alcoholic. I was involved with an alcoholic when I was doing objectives in Scientology. They're just retarded, faulty people, and they just are emotional and suddenly flicker and change. And so, yeah, you can have an ARC break, but should we call it that, or should we just say they're a fucking retard?
There are some people, for example...
Because I feel like ARC break is giving it respect and making out that you said something wrong that caused the ARC break, or you ordered them something wrong, and it's just it's all wrong wise. It's like, no, the person's just a fucking retarded alcoholic. Who gives a fuck? Just get back in session.
Go to a prostitute too often, and it's just their version of alcohol, and so they'll go in ethics and they'll get it handled again and again and again, and it'll just end up being a waste of time. So I just want to get a sort of clear answer on this. So you think that yeah, it's stupid just continually sending someone to ethics to do the same program?
No, well, one of the definitions, not LRH's definitions, but one of the definitions is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Like you use the example of somebody visiting a prostitute or somebody that masturbates all the time. In those situations when you're dealing with the body and you're dealing with sex, I don't know if you know this or not, but what you're dealing with is you're dealing with a drug addict. Did you know that?
Yeah. Sex is a drug because it releases chemicals. So does running. So does everything. We're constantly on different chemicals and drugs all the time. Not to mention people who are on caffeine and cigarettes, and the chemicals that are in the water supply that you're drinking, which is fluoride. So we're all high on drugs all the time.
Like as in the body's like a drug or something?
Well, when a person has an orgasm, and this might be dicey for some of our listeners.
Like what I'm trying to say is we're never not on drugs.
But you just need to raise their confront and take a look at this. Dopamine is what is created and exuded from the glands when a person has an orgasm. And what happens is the being in the body, and this is where the differentiation needs to be made. The body gets used to this, and the body runs the thetan around. So when somebody gets used to a lot of dopamine being put into the body to smooth them out, if they're having a problem in their life or something like that, and then they have to handle it that way with going to see a prostitute or with sex, and one of its forms, they are a dopamine addict. So you have to treat it the same way, and this is something that was overlooked in the church that can be handled just as if it was any other eating drug on a drug list.
Wow. That's an interesting way of looking at it from an auditing and CS point of view. I mean, I definitely noticed in life, I'd seen drug addicts, and then I'd look at someone who was like a food addict or someone who was a sex addict, and I was like, yeah, they're just different degrees of badness. And it's like, yeah, the drugs can really get in there and mess your mind up. And someone who's addicted to masturbation or whatever, it doesn't mess their mind up as much. But it's the same thing in that you've got this thetan that's hooked on sensations from the body. And to me, that's just a pathetic condition to be in. And that's what's, I guess, the problem with all of us in our bodies, in that we're stuck in these things and we're hooked on these sensations from the body. And it kind of reminds me of that line that the Christians say in the Lord's Prayer or whatever, that it says, lead me away from temptation or whatever, because there's something evil about temptation, because it's true. Yeah, really, that rings true.
See, yeah, it's listening to what I'm saying is that I don't think you should fight things because that's going to create problems. Let's use the masturbation thing as an example, right? That's a symptom of not having anything better to do. So you shouldn't sit there and try and stop masturbating. You should be doing cool things with your life, and then you won't be a masturbation addict, you know? So it's like, anyway, that's just, with these addiction things, it's like you got to try and find the correct why and solve the...
It's an old tale, and the thing is, and you can come full circle on it, just if you were to look at it from the viewpoint of the OT levels and the entire bridge, that eventually you get to a point on the OT levels, and it's different for everybody. There's a line of demarcation where it does or it doesn't happen, but you start to differentiate the fact that you're the driver of the VW that you're driving. You're not the VW. And when you really, really get that and you differentiate the difference between the drives of the thetan and the drives of the body, and you kind of talk to the body and you say, hey, look, I'm not going to have you take me into Perth today. I need to go to Sydney instead. That's where the differentiation comes in, is you have to realize that there is a source on this, and on the upper levels, you're able to differentiate. Now, I'm not saying that it happens early on, because you can get pushed around by the Nolch case and never really realize it for ages. But being able to differentiate what the body's desires are and what your desires are, it is, in fact, part of the OT levels. And
wow,
being able to make a differentiation, even in session.
I'm back then. The old Andy is impressed.
You can sit there and you can see on the meeting. You go, well, I didn't think anything. Well, that's the body. The body's going, I want to do this, or I'm thinking about this. And when you can start to differentiate, because you got yourself and you got the body, and then you have the Nolch case. And like LRH talks about in the HCOV about the composite.
So can I just say what Hubbard did was so shifty, because you take somebody, right, they don't know about engrams, and you tell them about them, and so you're giving them this all this stuff to audit, and you're giving them this case, and then the person audits that and they go clear, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, clear. And then he gives you the OT levels. He gives you a whole new case. You've got these body thetans and all this sort of stuff. And he gives you this case. And then the person just invents all this shit again, the same way they were doing with the Dianetics thing. It's just such a funny scam.
That's what you're dealing with. And you have to differentiate these different sources out, because you've got the Nolch case, you've got the body, and you've got yourself. And when you can differentiate that, then you can start getting a handle on, well, I want to have sex today, or I want to eat today, or I want to do this, and you can...
So obviously Jonathan believes that he has a Nolch case. You can tell by the way he's wording it. But what if someone's sitting there and they're like, I don't believe that I have one? You know?
Treat it like we're a 5-year-old kid. Okay, listen, Johnny, here's the deal. We've got these products we have to get out right now, and then we'll have a nice big lunch around about 3 o'clock. Can you deal with that? Yeah, I can deal with that. And then you just move on. But it literally works that way, especially when you get on the upper end of the bridge.
All right, I'll just keep on going. Just 5 more minutes. I'm liking this. It's just that I already listened to the first hour and a half the other day, so it was kind of boring me. But it's good that I'm now into the next bit that I haven't heard, and it's more interesting. We're getting into auditing, so it's a bit more interesting. So I'll go for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I remember one time I was a bit sleepy and I was like sleeping in, and although I think it's kind of good to sleep in because if your body needs rest, it needs rest. But I thought, in my head I was like, well, hold on, if my thoughts create reality, can't I just think that I'm not tired and just get up? And so I sort of did it, and I kind of thought, wow, like when you go OT like properly,
yeah, you could do it as a once-off, but like it's not a regular thing. If you've got an allergy to dairy and the next day after eating dairy you feel fucked, which sometimes happens to me, your body just can't handle dairy, and you can think all you like, but you feel tired and it'll be hard to get out of bed.
That kind of what it's like, in that you can literally just sit there in bed in the morning and be like, well, I'm going to change that reality that I'm tired, and then just suddenly you can get up. Or like, oh, I'm going to change that reality that like I desire alcohol or whatever, and just change it by thinking, and then you suddenly you don't want to drink.
Well, there's, depending on where you're at as to where you can actually, because see, the thing is if you looked at the grade chart and you'll see on the side, I forget if it's the right or the left side. I think it's the left side. It's up, maybe even be in the middle, depending on the grade chart. When you start, it actually says source on there. Well, a lot of people think, well, source. Oh, well, that's LRH. No, it's not. It's source. It's what's source. What's the source? What's the source of the problem? Where is this thought coming from? What's the source of
So where on the bridge? Where on the bridge is that? What level?
I don't remember specifically, but it's quite a ways up there, because you're looking at the top, because you're looking at...
By the way, yes, since this thing's been made, one of the top independent Scientologists, Michael Moore, has passed away. And that's not surprising. I mean, he was old, but he didn't live any longer than people normally do. And in fact, died, like many Scientologists have, died younger than my grandparents, even though none of them were doing Scientology. I mean, there's just so much evidence that Scientologists don't live longer, that they don't have no problems. It's just so obvious.
Recognition of source, because that's what awareness is, oh, well, that's...
Like, I'm telling you, I would believe some of this OT stuff if I actually saw evidence indicating it. If I saw a dude that's like 100 years old and he looks like he's 68, then I'll go, wow. But I'm not seeing it.
From this, or this is the problem here that other people aren't seeing. We need to pull the string and find out what this issue is. So the further up the bridge you go, and beyond even what LRH mapped out, that's where you start to really get the idea of source, not only with yourself as a composite being, but as to what's going on in the universe and other universes around you. those are the sources. So you're able to spot these things, not from just that. It's just, there it is. It's really cool.
Yeah. So okay, but also as you get rid of your OT case, or you could call it pre-OT case, like before OT8.
Right.
You strip that away, and then is it then you're able to just override the problem, or basically you don't have the problem? You don't have to.
A lot of the scientific terminology, the words and the thing is, it all just bamboozles you and makes you think, oh wow, okay, and like it makes you think there's more to it, but then when you find out that it's like him just creating all these things like pre-OT case, and like it's all the sales talk. Like literally salesmen do this sort of stuff because it helps pump it up and make it sound interesting.
Right, the problem with tiredness in the morning or something.
I can only speak for myself and the people that I've dealt with in delivering services, and I think that it varies widely, because one person can have abilities and they could be on OT2 or OT3, and they may surpass some people that are on OT7 because they're just naturally in better shape. They're more uptoned, and maybe they haven't. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it, and I don't want to go beyond the scope of the question, but some people are just in better shape than others. So it'll vary where they'll run into this sort of thing.
Yeah, because even though a person can get up to OT7, the tech never really solves their problems. So someone at OT3 can be higher toned, and it's like, yeah, because they're naturally at that tone, and that person's naturally at that tone, and the tech doesn't modify the person who's up at OT7 because it just doesn't work, you know.
But you will find that you can be a lot more caught over things. To the degree that you go in session, and to the degree that you audit, is to the degree that your awareness level is going to increase. And you'll start to see things that you wouldn't normally see. You'll start to be aware of things. Some of them will be frightening because you didn't want to see them, and all you did is just get rid of the things that caused you to not want to see them. Whether it's with the body or whether with other people, every OT has different abilities. But across the board, your awareness level is going to rise tremendously around about mid-OT5 as you clear away the debris that is blocking your perception.
Yeah, and so these Scientologists, they say that Scientology increases their awareness. The reason why I don't believe that, I mean, it does. I do believe it, but as in to a certain degree, and it's like, is because, like I mentioned Michael Moore earlier, I remember he bought into the whole climate change bullshit, and he, like, some Scientologists bought into COVID and other stuff, and it's like, you know, if OT5, you know, really was magical, then that person would walk around, and if the tech really worked, they would walk around and they would be aware. They would be like, oh, I see through that government scam, and I see through that government scam, and they'll be like this genius. And I'll go, wow, I got to do OT5. I can't wait. But when you look at it and you're like, oh, that dude's just a dumbass like other people are a dumbass, and he's at OT5. You're like, well, it obviously isn't increasing his awareness. But Jonathan Burke just said it increases your awareness. So it's up to you if you want to believe that or not. But, I mean, like I said, yeah, Scientology for everyone. I agree. If you take a person to do Scientology for 6 years, at the end of it, you're going to have a person, I think, that's more aware. Right? But, you know, there's the scale of awareness is like, you need to be all the way up here, but you're just increasing them to there. And they're thinking they're all the way up here. And somebody on the street who hasn't even done any Scientology can just already be up there at awareness.
I just thought of something, it's a little bit off topic, but it's kind of like, sure. It's something that I've noticed in me, in that you evolve and you find out things. And I imagine that you and other OTs have this problem. And then suddenly, when you're around like a WOG, I mean, the difference between you and the WOG is so great. Like,
okay, so now I love hearing myself talk and criticizing myself. So, yes, if you compare a non-Scientologist to a Scientologist that's been doing Scientology for 10 years, I reckon that their awareness will be higher, right? But a lot of the time, the truth is that the Scientologist thinks that their awareness is higher than the non-Scientologist. Their head's up their ass, they've read all this Scientology stuff, Hubbard's brainwashed them, and they're walking around thinking they're aware of body thetans and thinking that that they have this genius awareness and all this sort of shit. And the truth is that when you've got someone in that condition where they're properly brainwashed, sadly, you have to bring them down to reality, bring them down, give them a red pill and make them realize that you're really not that aware. And you just been thinking that you're aware because your head's up your ass.
It's like almost like your comm level just drops down because it's like you almost can't communicate them because you're aware of all this other stuff. And then it kind of almost becomes a new problem that you've got in your life because it's like, it's just kind of weird because it's just like, wow, like this is what, like for example, I've looked into the whole alien issue a lot. And what's his face? What's that former astronaut, Edgar Mitchell or whatever? I mean, he says in interviews, and I mean, I've collected heaps of other information to back this up, but he says that the US are in communication with an alien race, right? And he says, no, I know for sure, right? Mm-hmm. Sure. And I'm also at that point where I almost know for sure because I've seen so much evidence for it. And so then it's like you sit next to someone at a bus stop or something, and it's like, who has no idea about this, and it's like, how can you communicate to this person when, like, it's just you're in a whole new realm of existence, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it kind of becomes a new problem in life in that there's definitely something that sort of cuts your comm, like as in like you like I can talk to someone like you, but when it comes to the average person, it's like whoa, you know what I mean? They're still in the matrix. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, admittedly, it is something that as you run in, as you go up the OT levels, you tend to pull in people that want to talk to you because you're a cleaner's terminal. And it's sort of like having a fishing line and you put a little drop.
I just think all these things are such, he's saying, you're going to pull in people because you're a cleaner terminal. And I feel like he's possibly making a reference to body thetans, OT levels, and you having clean energy because you don't have body thetans or something like that. I don't know. I'm just not buying any of that. Like, you could, if you're pulling in more people who are interested in funky things like aliens, it's because that's what you've been focusing on, and the universe tends to have this thing where like attracts like. So if you're interested in swimming pools, you'll have people who are around swimming pools coming into your universe. It's just sort of how things work. But it's just like all these theories, and it's just like, what the hell?
Oil on it, and the oil wants to go downhill and ride down that fishing line.
I think that when you're new to all this, it's just like the first few years you're into the first probably 2 years you're into Scientology, you're like, whoa, so interesting. And then when you know what's really going on, you're like, this is just
at the
bullshit.
Bottom as an OT, and I mean, as an auditor, it's just something you're used to. It can get tiring to be in session 8-10 hours a day and have the inflow constantly, but I would think that most auditors, including myself, are flat on it. I didn't really like myself, and I didn't really like people until I finished OT7. That was one of the...
Oh, that's a bit strange. I thought that you would like people after going clear.
And phenomena that I had, and I have a lot more compassion for people, and I'd always wanted to be an auditor, so it was there, but it is difficult to talk to people that have different realities. But the fact of the matter is that if you don't, you're going to be one big lonely thing.
He's totally right. Everyone has different intelligence levels. Everyone has different life experiences and has been exposed to different data, and you cannot exclude people who have different opinions to you. Like, for example, let's say with me and women that are like my age, in my generation, their heads are so far up their ass with leftism. They've been so brainwashed. If I excluded them, then, like, if I said, oh, you're trash because you're a leftist, I mean, there would be no women. I mean, I call it the vegetarian belt, but if you go from like the bottom of Germany and you head up through Europe you go into northern Germany, and then you got like Netherlands on the side, and then you go further up into Norway and Switzerland. This is the vegetarian belt in Europe, and all these girls of my generation are just vegetarians because they're buying the bullshit theories of vegetarianism, and you can't talk them out of it. Like, there's no point. So you can't just go, oh, well, that person's a dumbass and I'm not going to talk to them. Like, you have to be accepting of people who are different.
Yeah, and I think it's the thing that...
They've been brainwashed by the government into believing in vegetarianism. It's a whole agenda because they're less fertile. So, I mean, what the government's done across the whole world to reduce the fertility is epic, and it's so successfully worked. It's incredible. Like, my generation, the amount of babies we're producing, the white people of my generation, the amount of babies we're producing is like 0.5 per woman. It's so low.
You know, waking up to the truth, I think it is a bit of a rough journey. I think it's confronting. I think it's like, whoa, you know. Sure. I think it's much better than being, you know, under a condition of being mind controlled and having no idea what's going on around you and not being at cause. But
yeah, well, anyway, I might as well end it now. If you want to keep on watching it, it's called Jonathan Burke Part 1, the Indie Scientology podcast, number 19. There's still wow. I'm only like 30 minutes into the interview. I mean, it goes for another 2 or something hours. It's huge. And then there's other parts as well. But anyway, that's about it. You know, it's been 2 hours long, and so it's just interesting when you watch something, when you have a different knowledge base, and you can just pick a lot of holes in it and see through it. And I just keep on evolving and becoming more aware and learning more and more. And I assume because you're watching this, especially if you got to the end, you're the similar sort of person, so you should just keep on going. So anyway, I just thought I'd make that, and I'm working on the book, Scientology's connection to the CIA. I'm telling you, it's gold, and it's not one of these books that waffle on. I keep it to the point as much as possible. It's not going to be long. As an audio book, it might be 6 hours or something like that, which is fantastic because you can listen to it in one go. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be so good. It's going to blow your mind. You won't look at the world the same when you know what's going on with the government and intelligence agencies and what they're actually doing. Anyway, see ya.